I'm Jim Foster, Director of the City Club of Cleveland. Pleased to welcome you to our program this evening that we are co-hosting with the Federal Bar Association in the Northern District of Ohio. We have a special program with the 4 deans. We're calling it Meet the Deans, and this opportunity to hear some discussion about important issues that face the legal community and to learn a little bit more about them as individuals and about their schools. And it is a program in partnership with the Federal Bar Association. And here to serve as our moderator and introduce the program and get it going is Diana Thimmig, and she is president of the Federal Bar Association, Northern District of Ohio. Diana?
Thank you, Jim. We have on today's panel 4 very prestigious deans, and we'd like to start today's program by providing each of our deans an opportunity to briefly describe the demographics of their law school, basic philosophies, and identify if there's a defining characteristic which separates their law school from others. So if we could start with Martin Belsky, Dean and Professor of Law of the University of Akron School of Law.
Hi, thank you. If I was to define our demographics, it would be basically a regional school of national impact. What I mean by that is about 40 to 50% of our students come from northeastern Ohio, and about 50% come from outside. And we have certain specialized areas, trial, constitutional law, professional responsibility, and intellectual property, where we can attract students from all over the country. As far as our philosophy really is flexibility and diversity. We have a curriculum that allows you to go part-time during the day, part-time at night, full-time during the day, full-time at night, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and go back and forth as you need to, trying to keep our tuition as low as possible to allow students to do that. Diversity is that we are very interested in diversity. We have a strong recruiting effort to get people of all backgrounds and all races and religions and even geography. We try to assure academic success by a very strong academic support program to allow them to continue going on. We have a specialized curriculum for students at risk. We have our own in-house bar program, and we now include the commercial bar review course in our tuition, so a student won't have to lay money out at the end of their time to be able to take a bar review course. We are also very interested in the Carnegie Report skills development. Bill Jordan, who is the Associate Dean, raise your hand, is leading the effort to move to our skills-based curriculum. We're trying to find our faculty, which is in transition, people who are practitioner scholars. What I mean by that is people who are going to do the right kind of scholarship for us to put us on the map and to make us more visible, but also are people who have some experience out there so they can apply some of the skills they learned in the real world in the classroom, and to include skills in the first year, second year, and third year. Drafting a document, having an argument, doing a negotiation, doing an arbitration. We're trying to incorporate that curriculum as we change our faculty. Like most law schools, we have a number of individuals who are the pre-boomers and boomers who are retiring. It gives us a real opportunity to take a look at how our faculty is changing. Last but not least, the economics of law school, at least for us, has changed. Only 65% of our costs come from tuition and state aid, which means we have to raise 35% year in and year out just to pay our costs. When I went to law schools were cash cows for university. We're not only not cash cows, we're probably milking the university for some of the money that we get. The problem we have is maintaining the curriculum, maintain the programs, maintain the facilities, and not having tuition increase to such a level that we become prohibitive of our students. That's it.
Thank you, Dean Belsky. Craig M. Boyes is the Dean and Professor of Law at CSU, Cleveland Marshall College of Law. Would you like to give us some of the demographics of your school?
Certainly. Thank you, Diana. We're a law school of about 170 in each entering class. That class is made up of roughly 44% women. This year we had 21% of our students who were students of color. Diversity is also important for us. We were, as a law school, the winner of the Law School Admission Council's first annual Diversity Matters Award in 2010. So that is a big part of who we are as a law school. We draw students from 62 different undergraduate institutions across the country, 17 different states, although most of our students are from Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania, and Canada. We have a fair share of students who come from Michigan, Yale, Princeton, Duke, Notre Dame. We also have a lot of students who come to law school from other careers. And this is one of the hallmarks, I think, of Cleveland Marshall. We began as a part-time law school for folks back in the 19th century, and that continues to be a big part of what we do and our focus. Some of our most successful alums are folks who have transitioned from one career to another and gone to law school, gotten their legal education while working in another area. We focus on practical training for our students. We're finding that this is increasingly important. Law firms and other employers want students to come out of law school with some sense of what they ought to be doing once they get to their employers. We're aided in that by a very strong and broad base of alums. About 90% of our alumni remain within a 60-mile radius of Cleveland, and more importantly, they spend a lot of time at the law school, whether it's helping us with moot court programs, job interviews, mock job interviews. They hire a lot of our students, and so we're very fortunate to have that resource as we try to educate students. Our motto is learn law and live justice. We're proud of the tradition, again, stretching back to the 1900s of educating folks here in Cleveland. We're proud to be a part of this community, and we'll continue to do so as we go forward.
Lawrence E. Mitchell is the Dean and Professor of Law at Case Western Reserve School of Law here in Cleveland. Would you like to give us some demographics of your school?
Thank you, Diana. Yes. Let me start out with our overriding philosophy, and that is that great cities have great law schools. That explains our demographics a little bit and what we add to the city of Cleveland. About 2/3 of our students come from outside the state of Ohio, and about 50% of them stay in the state of Ohio, particularly in Northeast Ohio. We are the entry point for students from around the country and increasingly around the world, bringing talent to this area that previously had not been here, helping to grow this community. Our students, as I say, are national in scope, and our philosophy is to train lawyers who become leaders. In visiting our alumni, I can tell you our alumni are leaders. They go from the chairman of Warner Brothers to the chairman of the FDIC, heads of investment banks, entrepreneurs, heads of law firms. They are counsel to courts of justice throughout the world. And this is what we foster in our students, a sense of leadership and obligation as social engineers trained in the law. Our diversity is extremely important to us. I have to say that we haven't done as well as we could, although this year we increased our class percentage of students of color by 33%, which I'm very proud of and something that we're working on significantly to increase. We specialize in a number of different areas. I think it's important, as each dean is describing the distinctiveness of their school, to note that no law school can be everything to everybody. So for us, in terms of experiential education, of which I'm enormously proud, our school for a decade has been a leader, requiring 4 semesters of lawyering skills training and everything from all of the litigation skills to contractual drafting to negotiation, deal making, and situational lawyering as well. We offer externships around the world to our students during the course of the semester, anywhere from law firms in Shanghai to international war crimes courts. We have also the opportunity for our students to study abroad for a semester in one of our partner schools in China or Europe. We're about to sign up in Singapore and Brazil. So we try to provide a rich international education. We have 60 LLMs from foreign countries in our building, as well as a number of JDs from foreign countries, which gives us a diversity of national origin that's important both to our students' education and to their ultimate career as lawyers in the world. We have a first-rate international law program run by a Nobel Prize nominee, Michael Scharf. We have the first law medicine program in the country, which takes advantage of our location with university hospitals, our medical school, and the Cleveland Clinic. We have a really innovative program in intellectual property, law, technology, and the arts, which melds our university engineering and innovation history with entrepreneurialism, with educating our students to represent creative people, and we are in the process of developing the arts side of that with the cultural institutions of University Circle. In fact, this summer we raised an endowed chair devoted, which will be reserved for a professor of law in the arts, and we'll be opening an art law clinic where our students will be representing students from CIM, CIA, and working in the major arts institutions.
Thank you. Daniel J. Steinbock, Dean and Professor of Law at the University of Toledo College of Law. We'd love to hear about Toledo School.
Thank you very much, Diana, and thank the Federal Bar Association for hosting this event. The University of Toledo College of Law is located not downtown, but on the edge of the city in a nice residential area. We're probably the smallest of all the schools you're going to hear about tonight. We have 440 students. We began a little over 100 years ago as a YMCA evening school. We added a day division in 1964 and became part of the state university system in 1967. We are about 63% of our students come from Ohio. The rest come from around the country and indeed the world. And about half of our students remain in Ohio. We have alumni in all of the states of the United States, except, I'm told, the 2 Dakotas. And I'm pleased to see several of our alums here tonight. We have small classes. It's a place to learn law in a small, caring environment. We tell our students that you really have to work hard not to be known by your professors. We continue to have an evening division, but people can move back and forth as they choose between the day and the evening division. Day students can take classes in the evening and vice versa. We have 5 areas of concentration in which people can earn certificates, and they are criminal law, international law, intellectual property law, labor and employment law, and I feel like Rick Perry, I forgot the 5th. It'll come to me.
Department of Energy.
Thank you. One of the things we pride ourselves, we are a state school, as 2 of the others are, is trying to make legal education affordable to people without a tremendous amount of means. We pride ourselves in taking in people of all backgrounds whose families do not have graduate or professional degrees. They may be the first people in their families to go to college. We have been selected as a best value law school by National Jurist magazine for the last 3 years. That's based on bar passage rate, employment rate, tuition rate, and this year, student indebtedness when they leave law school. We're very cognizant of trying to give people the means to further themselves, to enter a profession in a way that they can afford, and frankly, that will not limit their choices in life. I guess I will stop on that note, and thank you.
We're going to switch topics and go a little bit to law school economics. The law school applicant pool decreased by 12% from 2010 to 2011, and right now the pool is down 16% for the class of 2012. How do you see this impacting the law school's bottom line and its overall budget? And if we could start with Dean Mitchell.
Sure. Well, I'm actually pleased to say that this year we are at the moment down only 4%, as against the national average of 16%. I've never been so happy to be down anything in my life. But we're continuing to gain on that national average and hoping that we will at least equal or exceed last year, where admittedly we were down with everybody else. But the economics are real, and they're complex. What we've decided to do as a law school is cut our class size by 10%, which is going into effect this year. We're doing that for a number of reasons, not the least of which is we believe that the restructuring of the legal profession is a permanent fact of life. We believe that the demographic trends are going to lead to fewer applicants. We believe that we ought to be concentrating our resources on a fewer number of students and spending a better doing a better job educating those students so that they can fulfill the mission of our law school. In order to do this, we are going to be undergoing some pain. We have some significant budget cuts, and as the other deans here know well, running a law school is kind of like running a railroad. Almost all the costs are fixed, so it's really hard to find room to cut, but we have made the effort to find that room. And what we will expect to be as we go through this process is a much stronger, healthier law school with better students, better educated, and better ready to enter the legal profession.
Yes, Dean Belsky?
I agree with what Larry said on many of the things about the future. We're also going to try to cut our entering class by slightly less than 10%, and I think the provost is going to agree to that. But I want to correct a misimpression. It is naive to believe that if the law schools decrease their numbers, these law schools, it'll decrease the number of people going to law school. There are increasing number of law schools that are being created. Basically, anybody who wants to get into a law school today can get into some law school. It's a sad commentary, but that's true, including online law schools. Concord Law School has 8,600 students. That's an unaccredited law school in California. The bar pass rate last year was 23%, but 23% of 8,300 is still a lot. And what happens is many of those people go there, and then 5 years later they'll wind up going to other places and waive in. That's the first issue. The second issue is, yes, we do have to watch our costs. And one of the problems you want to do is watch your costs but not let it affect your financial aid. It's an easy thing to cut your financial aid. You know, we're an affordable law school. Our students have a tuition debt of about $60,000, which is relatively low. But I don't want to increase tuition, but I also don't want to decrease the amount of money available for scholarships and financial aid. That's the balance. Do we decrease the size of our faculty? Well, then you increase the student-faculty ratio. The only place I see future costs really being able to be saved is moving from the old fixed library with lots and lots of books to a more technology-based library, and I think there are some real opportunities for cost savings there. I also think we have to take a look at distance learning. One of the things I'd like us four to talk about in the next couple of years is what things we can do collaboratively so that we can have courses offered in one place that are available in more than one place, and so we don't overlap with each other, or at least to handle some issues that we have not handled before. We have to look to technology to keep costs down. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to afford the future. And that's a real problem for our students, because the only place we can get the money now is from alums and students.
I was wondering, with the drop of applicants, are any of the law schools shifting their requirements for admission down as well to keep the class sizes up?
That's why we're reducing the size of my class, to not do that.
If I can respond, we this past entering class in August, we took a slightly smaller class, a little over 10%, but we did it in part to raise our entering credentials. So at least it's from our point of view, it's our desire to keep the credentials where they are, or in fact increase them.
Thank you, Dean Steinbock. And I saw, Dean Boise, you were also nodding your head. I take it at Cleveland State you're also trying to increase the requirements? Yes,
I think this is a good point at which to highlight the importance of the U.S. News and World Rankings, and it's something that all of us as deans have to live with. We probably all of us disagree with the methodology behind the rankings, but the rankings tend to be the thing that students look to in deciding which law school to go to. And so as the applicant pool shrinks, more students have an opportunity to go to schools that are ranked higher in the U.S. News pecking order. And so what that does is it leaves fewer students for the schools that are ranked lower in that ranking. But I think it's important that that despite the fact that there's a shrinking applicant pool, we think about the need of students to be successful in passing the bar. So we can't simply continue to allow students to come in, collect their money, and then send them off to fail the bar and not be successful as lawyers.
Yes, Dean Mitchell.
I'd like to add to that. Craig, of course, makes a really good point, but I would want to go back to Marty's point for a second about anybody being able to get into a law school, which some law school. And that is, I think all of us, when we talk about what we're doing with our class sizes, recognize and understand the ultimate consumer of the product we produce is the public, the clients of our students. And so maintaining quality and improving quality while we are all conscious of U.S. News and World Report, of course, is really got the imperative behind it of being sure that we are turning out the best lawyers possible. A law school that admits 8,600 students online is not producing the same product that all of us are.
And if I could just jump in, to some extent, the U.S. News rankings do reflect some connection between ultimate success. So things like the entering law school admissions test score for students who are entering law school are predictors of success on the bar exam. So it's not as though the rankings are totally divorced from reality, but they certainly do have some shortcomings.
Switching topics slightly, I want to also say another misimpression. I don't think our society has enough lawyers. That's going to shock you, but let me sort of explain that for a second. If you look to see what lawyers do in our society, politics, government, business, like Larry, we have a lot of CEOs who graduate from our law school, people who have no intention of practicing law. But more than that, the ABA statistics say that less than 50% will ever use a lawyer in our society. Only 1 person in 4 will ever use a lawyer more than 3 times. We have a lot of things that lawyers should be doing. I'm not talking about people who are partners in very big law firms. I'm talking about the people, the neighborhood lawyers. The fastest area of growth right now is prepaid legal services across the country. People will pay a certain amount of money. And lawyers can make very comfortable, not very wealthy livings, comfortable livings in a community, in a small community, taking work, for example, a lease, a credit card agreement, a mortgage. Those are the kind of things a lawyer should look at. And if somebody's paying $19 or $29 a month for a prepaid plan, they're going to take that to a lawyer. A conversation was really had at the ALS meeting where, if you think about this, we are now where the medical profession was in the 50s. The medical profession, you went to see a doctor when you were sick. You didn't go to see a doctor to prevent being sick. And then Blue Cross Blue Shield came in, and then HMOs came in. Well, we're in that same situation now. People go to see a lawyer when they have a problem. Ordinary citizens, I'm not talking about business and corporations. We need to have people go to see a lawyer before they have a problem. Preventative law. And if we do that, we don't have enough lawyers.
Starting this year, law schools will no longer be able to receive state subsidies in Ohio for non-Ohio residents. What impact is this change going to have on the Ohio public law schools? And I'd ask Dean Steinbock to start with that question.
Some of you may know Toledo is 5 miles south of Michigan. And it was almost in Michigan if Ohio hadn't won the border war. So we have a fairly large number of students from southeast Michigan. And so this has had an impact on us. And the ironic thing is, as was pointed out by one of the other deans, sometimes people come from out of state and they wind up staying here and adding to the economy. So frankly, I think this is kind of short-sighted position that the legislature took. It has had an effect because it means we get state subsidy for fewer students. I suspect, we haven't talked about the competition among us, but I suspect it will mean that there will be some competition for Ohio residents among us public law school deans. But it has some financial consequences.
I got to say that I think we are being naive if we believe that state funding for law schools will continue much long, period. If I were the governor or legislature and I have a choice between giving money to high schools or even colleges and giving money to law schools, I'm not sure law schools are going to win that. So I think we have to get used to the idea of decreasing state subsidies, period. And we have to learn to live with that. Michigan has already. And I think we just have to learn to figure out how to handle our budget, fundraising. All you alums out there, keep your cards and letters coming in, folks. And tuition. I don't think that's going to have an effect on us at all, because I think we have to plan for the idea of not having state subsidies. I think it's just going to happen.
The changing economics are going to affect the diversity in law school admissions. It's going to have some impact. Dean Boyes, would you please address that particular issue?
Well, you have a shrinking overall pool of applicants and class sizes are getting smaller. It becomes more important for law schools to focus on maintaining a significant segment of their entering class that are students of color. And that's something that we have focused on. Look, I've spent time, I practiced law for 9 years before I started teaching, and I've been involved in diversity recruiting at the law firm level in a variety of situations at different law firms. I can tell you it's never easy. So from my perspective, yeah, it's a challenge, but it's always a challenge, and it requires constant attention and dedication to find ways to attract students of color.
Well, what plans, if any, are being considered by the law schools to reorganize and expand the pipeline of diverse students that actually matriculate to and graduate from law school? And perhaps Dean Mitchell could start with that.
Sure. We actually, this summer, created a diversity committee to examine the problem of an inadequately diverse student body and how we can improve and increase that. It's a committee composed not only of faculty, but alumni, federal judges, our own university vice president of diversity and inclusion. I have also been meeting with local not-for-profits that work on diversity issues to help us develop pipelines so that we can increase the diversity of our student body. We do have summer programs for high school students in Cleveland, and we expose them to our law school at that point in the hope that they will perhaps enter the profession, and if they do, that they'll choose to come to us. And we are still in the process of improving where we are. So it's too early for me to give you any concrete answers. I've only been dean since June 1st. But we are well on the way towards planning to improve our diversity.
You indicated there was a 33% increase in diversity
Yes.
this year, and I was just wondering how many students does that translate into?
That translates into about 10 students, 8 students, approximately. It's not large in numbers. I give my predecessor credit for this. It's not large in numbers, but it's significant in percentages, and we are going to fight the battle every way we can.
Dean Belsky, would you contribute on what your law school is
Well, I
doing?
wanted to say more generally, all of the law schools in the state of Ohio, under the leadership of former Dean Nancy Rogers, has organized this law and leadership program, which means we bring in middle school students when they come in the summer before they start high school and stay for 4 years. And they have programs during the year. All law schools have done this, not just us, but all law schools. And we have found a very high success rate of these people. We have their first graduating class now coming up this year to have an interest. Not only that, but they go back to their community and they talk about the idea of law school being a possibility. So if you talk about the pipeline, we go back to that pipeline. The secondary pipeline is that we're going to HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, to sort of indicate to them that it's not that scary to come to the Midwest to go to school and to sort of come up here and to sort of work to try to get them to come up here and sort of organize effort. In addition, another technique is to, honestly, is for a lot of these people are need-based scholarships, which we all try to do, part-time programs, which students can sort of work while they're going through, alternatives to traditional education in the sense that they can sort of work together for joint programs for law and undergraduate school. We have to think of different ways to do it, but we have to start with the middle schools. It's almost too late by the time they get into their second and third year of college.
Dean Steinbock, did you want to add something?
I wanted to add two things. One is at this meeting of American law schools that was held just 2 weeks ago, one presentation talked about general demographic changes. And of course, the United States is becoming less Caucasian and more minority over time. And that bodes well for increasing diversity in law schools, and it obviously underscores the importance of doing it. The one other thing I wanted to mention was that we've created a relationship with one of the historically black colleges in Ohio, and we're trying to create a pipeline from college to law school, in addition, of course, to participating in law and leadership.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit. In the last 15 months, in scholarly reports and newspapers and legal blogs, critics have leveled accusations against law schools in misleading students about their job prospects. I think most of us have probably read those articles over the last year, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to these allegations, and not to say that they were leveled against you or your school, but Dean Steinbock, how would you respond to those types of allegations?
In a few ways. First of all, those of us up here know that the American Bar Association and Section on Legal Education is taking steps so that more information, more detailed information about the employment of our graduates is made available widely, and we now have that on our website. The information that was there was probably true as far as it went. And the interesting thing is, I was talking to our Assistant Dean for Career Services, who's here tonight, on the drive over, and I was wondering whether law schools, in fact, even before this latest reform, have not given more information to prospective applicants than most colleges or graduate schools. But the fact is that it was given in kind of general form. Now, people entering law school ought to be able to ask questions when you get information in general form. Obviously, we're trained to do that once we're in law school. And I guess what I'm getting at here is I think some of this was overblown. That anybody who didn't ask more questions or read from sources other than law schools about the state of the legal profession was being very naive.
How do you, yes,
I'd like to
Dean
address that,
Mitchell.
too. I would like to just point out that I think that much of the reporting that's been done has been irresponsible reporting and done sensationalistically. First, law schools like ours do report in fairly granular detail job results, including jobs that require a JD, jobs in which a JD is preferred, jobs that don't require a JD. So that information is available to our students. But I think that the problem that this reporting focuses on misses the point of a legal education. What this reporter in particular is talking about is your first job out of law school. We are not educating our students for their first job out of law school. We are educating our students for a career as a lawyer, or a career which can benefit from the education that we provide. Yes, it's true that there are difficulties getting jobs now. We don't deceive anybody about that, and anybody who lives in the world, at least in the United States, can no longer be deceived about that if anybody ever did deceive them. But it also bears remembering that what we're talking about is a career of 40 or 50 years. And so this focus is misplaced.
I hate to disagree with you, but I think there were certain instances that were reported by the New York Times where, and in particular, they were discussing...
No, you're right. There are a couple of bad actors, no question.
For example, the Thomas Jefferson
Right.
Law graduates were told 9 months after graduation that they had a 92% employment rate among their graduating students. And in reality, 25% of the students never even responded to the polls, so they couldn't have made that.
You are right, Diana. There are a couple of bad actors, and I should have mentioned those, but I'm sitting with honest people here.
Dean Boyce?
Actually, I'm not sure that that's dishonesty, because what law schools do is they respond to a set of questions that they're presented with from the ABA. What is the percentage of your graduates who are employed? And the more important question is what percentage of your graduates are employed in jobs that actually require their JD? And that's a valuable data point for students who are considering going to law school. I'm pleased to say that Cleveland Marshall has the highest percentage among Ohio public law schools of graduates who are employed in jobs that require their JD. But that wasn't the way the question was worded. So yes, it looks as though it were deceptive. And then you're right, there is often a very small percentage of students that actually respond to the questions. Once students graduate, we don't have any more control over them. So we can send them emails all day and asking where do you work, how much do you make, but we get a very, very small number of responses to those. So I think that the important thing is to say, okay, this information is based on a very small sampling. And again, that's an important data point for students who are considering what their likely job prospects are, but it doesn't flow from law schools really being deceptive. It's just the set of questions with which we're presented.
I think the message you're getting from everybody is the issue is transparency. The issue is what we're doing and how we're doing it and what we're saying. And again, if you look on our website, you'll see the people in various situations. I might disagree on whether or not someone practicing as a lawyer is the absolute criteria. The head of First Energy is one of our alums. He says that the reason he got his job to start and he's doing what he is because of a law degree. The President of the United States is a lawyer. Would you call him practicing law? So I think the definitions are an issue, but I think the issue is transparency. And law, as you probably remember from your days in law school, disclosure, environmental law, securities, is disclosure, disclosure, disclosure. What we have to do, and that's what the ABA is working on, especially the section of legal education, is working on a list of questions that makes it very clear what you're getting yourself into. And that's what we can't respond to the issue about whether or not someone should go to law school or not go to law school based on our employment numbers. The issue is they have to have the information to make an informed decision. That's the only thing we can do. There are people who will choose to go to law school with the worst possible statistics for all kinds of reasons, right? But they have to understand what the risks and opportunities are. So I think, and as you said, there are some schools that play games. There's one school that would hire individuals from October to February. We know that. And what they would do is then hire them, and then when it came for the employment numbers, look, they were employed. We know another school, when there was an ABA committee that looked at this, another school that basically used to say to students, to them, if you are employed in a job that uses your legal skills, please let us know. And at any time, and if that person 6 months or 9 is not in that job, they would still count that number because they interpret it at any time. So the issue is transparency and honesty. We hope that people are going to be honest. We hope that people are going to be transparent. But the decision still has to be the students.
The rising cost of law school is becoming a pretty sore subject as the number of high-paying jobs are evaporating. With large numbers of unemployed or underemployed lawyers, many of whom have borrowed heavily to finance their undergraduate degrees and their law degrees, how do you respond to growing skepticism about the value of the law degree? And I'd like I was reading an article last week, and they talked about an ad for a paralegal position, and 40% of the applications that came in were actually from lawyers who were trying to apply for the paralegal position, much to the shock and chagrin of the person that had to sort through them. But how would you respond to the question about the value of a law degree in today's society? Dean Boyes?
Well, I think this goes back somewhat to the previous question. The value of a law degree can't be measured simply by the job that you get right out of law school. And I think that's the error. And I think that a lot of students, prospective students, look at law school as a guaranteed six-figure opportunity for them, and that's simply not the case. I think that it's, if we were to look at what is the employment record for, let's say, PhDs in history, we'd find an even worse picture. So I think that a law degree is something that hopefully you come to with a great deal of passion, and it's something that will serve you throughout your life. Whether you're the head of your neighborhood watch group, people respect attorneys and respect that education, the ability to think critically. That's a hallmark of the legal education. So I think to measure it simply in terms of, is it worth it because you can't get a six-figure job immediately after graduation, is the wrong question to be asking.
And I think this goes to Dean Belsky's comments, too, about how many of their graduates actually don't go into the practice of law, but go into other professions.
But we do have an obligation to keep tuition as low as possible within realistic numbers and to keep the loan indebtedness. I mean, the difficulty is we have students, and I can tell you this, some of you might know that I'm a serial dean. That's one step removed from being a serial killer. I can tell you over the history, I've had students come in who want to borrow more money so they can take that second ski trip or get a new car. We have an obligation to make sure they manage their resources. Many students will have their parents pay for their undergraduate and they have to borrow for their law school experience. So we have to work with them as much as we can to have them not over-borrow. Maybe they should get a part-time job to work outside, but we have to work with them so they have a low loan debt, and I think that's significant. The second part of it is, and I think this is probably important, there has been cyclical problems in legal employment for the last 45 years. A study was recently done by one of the foundations, I remember, which talked about people coming out in certain times where they couldn't get jobs and they had expenses, et cetera, and then over time they'd get legal jobs or they'd use their legal skills in other ways to sort of indicate what they've done. My father, may he rest in peace, went to law school, couldn't get a job coming out of law school, became a salesman. And he said his law school education, however, helped him make decisions when he became a manager that he couldn't have made otherwise because it trained the mind as well as other things. So we have to think a little bit broader, but we do have an obligation to keep the loan debt as low as possible.
Dean Steinbock?
I think all of higher education is actually being reevaluated as a value proposition right now. And that makes good sense, and that's where the transparency is important. Let people make informed decisions. You might say, with applications down, that some people have chosen to vote with their feet and not apply to law school. The other piece of this, as Dean Belsky said, is to try to keep tuition down, try to give them good value for what they do pay. It occurred to me as we're talking about this that this might bring back the appeal of part-time programs, because in a part-time program, if you have a full-time job, you're at least covering your living costs and perhaps some of the tuition costs. So, you know, it makes sense for people to consider whether it is worth going to law school. That I would agree with.
Dean Mitchell, did you want to add something?
Well, I think that's exactly right, that, that one thing that the increased tuition and the need for students to borrow more does do is it makes the decision to go to law school a more mindful one. I know I probably shouldn't say this as a law dean. I went to law school because it seemed like a good idea at the time. And I suspect that if I were paying the kind of tuition that our students pay now, I wouldn't have made that decision, despite the fact that I found a great life in the law. I also point out, going back to what Marty and Craig have said, it's interesting to note to me that an increasingly small number of our graduates are actually going to law firms. I think our figures from last year's class at this point is a minority of them are going to law firms. And that's not because they can't find jobs. We have, and I noticed this even when I was interviewing for the position here, a disproportionately high number of students who go into business. And that's not behind the friolator. That's real business. I make a practice of asking joint degree holders, MBA, JDs, particularly when they're CEOs, which of their degrees is most valuable to them. The invariable answer is their law degree. The MBA teaches them technical skills. The law degree teaches them how to solve problems. So I want to echo what Craig and Marty have said, that if you look at the course of a career and the opportunities that a legal education provides you, there is significant value in a law degree.
We're going to switch focus again and look at curriculum issues. The global dimension of law practice is now pervasive, and it's increasing in a number of contexts. There's challenges of globalization that pose for coordinating legal work across national boundaries, achieving a coordinated and consistent regime for the regulation of lawyers, and fashioning approaches to legal education to equip students to navigate those global landscapes and to be sensitive to the multiple legal and cultural systems. What, if anything, has your law school done to address the issue? And I'm going to ask Dean Steinbock to address it first, because I know you do teach internationally each year.
Yeah, we have Toledo has a relationship with our sister city in Szeged, Hungary, and several of the faculty here have gone over, and some of our students have gone over and taught. There's a tremendous demand, it may not be exactly responsive, for English language and American-style legal education around the world. And I think that in a sort of gloom and doom atmosphere, I think it's worth mentioning that we, in some sense, our legal education is the envy of the world. Now, in terms of our students who are going to practice here, we have tried to integrate the international aspect of subject areas into the courses. So if we're teaching criminal procedures, something I teach, we'll try to bring in some international aspects of that and encourage teachers to do that in all of their courses. The fact of the matter is, though, I think if people are not going to large firms or other specialized practices. Graduating from American law school and practicing law in the United States is still largely a matter of domestic law. And while it's exciting to talk about the shrinking world and so on, for most people, the bulk of their practice is domestic law. Now, one has to be aware of other systems where international law comes into play. Certainly one has to know that. And I think probably most law schools make an effort to bring that into the classroom.
When I went to law school 30 years ago, I know that Case and Cleveland Marshall had a combined international studies program. I think they shared some of the professors. I was wondering if they still have that and if they still tried to develop that curriculum to meet the globalization issues.
We still have a shared program in Russia, a summer program, and most law schools have a sponsored summer abroad program somewhere in the world, and for law schools that don't have their own, they may do it in conjunction with other law schools, and students can enroll generally in the study abroad summer programs at other law schools that they don't attend. And I think that's important in broadening our students' horizons, but I do agree with what Deanna said, which is that I worked in New York for an international law firm, and the deals look much the same despite the parties that are involved. And there are specific areas of law where you do have to understand the international aspects of it. But I think it's much more important that we are developing a very strong foundation for our students in the practice of U.S. law. And as Larry said, we're also helping them become problem solvers, because at the end of the day, that's the value. It's not a substantive body of statutes that our students memorize. It's the ability to come to a problem, to come to a set of rules and figure out the solution.
Dean Belsky?
I like the phrase transnational law rather than international law. That's part of my bias from history. And the reason I'm saying that is I think with technology today, someone in a small town in Ohio can have a divorce problem with someone in Canada or someone in Mexico, someone who is dealing with patents and copyrights, in a small town in Pennsylvania can sort of understand that. So I really think the focus should be transnational law, which is comparative law as well as international law. And I think we're encouraging our students to think that way. It is a change. It is a change. Most of the things they're going to do are going to be local in nature, but they sort of will come back years later and say, I wish I had had some experience and some understanding of that. I think for us, for a school like us, which is a regional school of national impact, we are picking a few areas where we're focusing international. I spent some time in Beijing, and we have a memorandum of understanding with Peking University in IP, in intellectual property, where they have a professor who's coming in a couple weeks, and we're going to send somebody over there. We have students going back and forth because their graduate program is in English, which helps us a lot, because I don't think many of my faculty would like to go and teach in Chinese. But I think that we also had a program, an IP in Austria. We had a program in Geneva before. We're trying to work with a school named Bar Ilan in Israel to talk about specific areas. But I think our students are changing their mindset. I'm going to give a personal advertisement. I wrote an article, which is Legal Education in a Flat World, which I talked about the future. But we're not there yet. I think you're right, Dan. I mean, I think we're not there yet. Our students are not yet thinking that way. I think at Case they probably think more that way than other places, but I think we're sort of moving to that way. There was much more of an international focus, interestingly enough, in the 60s and 70s and early 80s in America than there is now. There was a whole movement, of the idea of acculturation of foreign issues into American law, especially American constitutional law, and there's been some backlash. And there'll be a backlash to that backlash, I think, for some of our students. But for us to survive as a society, our business people, et cetera, we had an individual real quick who's one of our alums who has a company that has business across the world. He told his general counsel that his general counsel is going to have to learn the civil system of justice before they can negotiate contracts in some of these foreign countries. So it's going to happen. I think Larry has a comment, too.
Yes.
I like Marty's capacious notion of transnational law, but I want to add another dimension to this as well that I think is as important, And that is, we have to remember that while, of course, we are educating lawyers, we are educating lawyers. And you cannot be an educated professional today without being, in some respect, a citizen of the world, without having cultural sensitivities that one has by experiencing other cultures, including other legal systems. This is among the reasons why we have semester abroad programs, not just summer programs, but semester abroad programs where our students go and study in Chinese classes, in European classes, in Brazilian classes. I'm actually an affiliated member of the faculty at Peking University, and we are about to sign a contract with them too, Marty. And
More the merrier.
yeah, I think so, and they do too. I think that part of the importance of this is to create, it's not necessarily that our students will be practicing international law, but they will be practicing law internationally. They will be practicing with people from other cultures, from other countries. Craig is right. I mean, I had a New York corporate practice, and a Eurobond issue in New York was still a debt issue in New York. But if you're representing a Japanese bank, or you're negotiating with a Russian oil company, not to have the experience and sensitivity to understand that different legal systems also come with different cultures and different ways of doing business is to shortchange our graduates. And so I think that's a very important dimension of the internationalization of legal education that we emphasize a lot.
Law schools have been criticized a lot for not imparting practical skills except in clinical programs. Is there anything that the law schools are doing that's on the horizon to incorporate more experiential learning in the curriculum? Yes.
I'll just speak to that. Our faculty passed, just before I took this job in July, a pretty substantial curricular reform, and part of that package of reforms involved a requirement that all of our graduates have completed an experiential skills requirement. To sort of jumpstart that, one of the things that we're looking at now is expanding that even further and using our clinical and externship program as a base for giving our students a chance to actually work on real transactions. A lot of this is because it's not that. I think the thing that students want is they want to start practicing law the day they walk into law school, and of course they can't do that. But the earlier that we can give them the chance to see how law applies and see how the substantive rules that they're learning actually apply to a problem, to a client's real transaction or to a bit of litigation, I think then we've provided a hook to hang that substantive knowledge on, and students retain it better and they're more excited about what they're doing.
I want to jump to another topic, distance learning, especially when we're talking about the cost of legal education. What do you see on the horizon as far as distance learning with law school? Yes, Dean Belsky.
I think we have to change the ABA rule first. We are doing some distance learning in the fall. The present rules are very restrictive on distance learning. I think there's some real opportunities out there for us to do it. I think any law school construction has to take into account. But there still is a old-fashioned Socratic method attitude towards legal education in the ABA, and there's a task force that's taking a look at this issue. It is really amazing when you talk to some individuals about distance learning. There's almost a fear from some lawyers. I'm really not law professors so much as it is sort of lawyers about distance learning. But I think we have to share resources. We have to decide what's going to go on. There might be a program in California that we think is very good for our students. There might be a program in Chile that's very good for our students. There might be a program in Beijing that's good for our students, and vice versa. But the first issue is going to have to be, it's a wave of the future, the first issue is going to have the accreditation rules changed, because they are very, very, very restrictive on this.
Well, and that was going to be my next question. If you believe the accreditation rules set by the ABA discourage innovation by the law schools, particularly in this area.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, Dean Mitchell?
I hate to disagree with Marty. I want to point out Marty was my first dean, so I really hate to disagree with him, although I think I always disagree with you.
That's right.
But I'm a little old-fashioned. I think if there are great programs in Beijing or wherever they are, you should send the students to those programs. But the value of legal education is, to me, and I may be a little bit Luddite in this respect, Distance learning is good for imparting knowledge, for conveying facts. What we're about is teaching problem solving, and I don't really think that you can replace the classroom interchange with distance learning. It's a good idea to generate revenue for law schools, no question about that, to expand student base. But I personally, and my faculty may disagree with me, and we may ultimately come to this, or legal education may prove me wrong, but I actually think that the old-fashioned way remains the best way.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'm going to stop. I think we're out of time. I want to thank each of you for your insightful comments. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
I'm not talking about e-learning.
Thank you, Diana and deans, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This program is now adjourned.